Okay, Jeremy? Jeremy? Oh, there we go. Good morning, everybody. I have to have a couple of more sips of coffee. Okay, now no excuses. Well, we're going to have another couple of hot days, it looks like, today and tomorrow, and then it's going to really cool off, which will be very fine with me.
Only if you go outside.
Well, I mowed last night, so, but yeah, I don't plan to go outside much today. Every once in a while, I think. Well, it's good to be together again. And for the first time in a long time, my two grandchildren are here. So um, they're in the class right now, and Victoria wanted to come to church, and so we're real happy about that. We've been studying the book of Job, and I believe we left off, John left off the beginning of chapter 31. And oh, I probably left that book back there. You guys have a study book, as I recall. Oh, there it is. Life links to God. And so, who could summarize what's gone on so far in first 30 chapters of Job? What is Job's issue?
He didn't do anything to deserve what he got. Because that's what they're contending, that he did something wrong, and that's why he's being punished.
Okay, Job is being tested, and he's lost everything. And his health is bad. He's lost his family. His finances are not doing well. And he can't figure it out, can he? So his friends come to console him and advise him. They don't do much encouraging. Because what is their friend's assumption? What is Job's problem? He's done something wrong, a lot wrong. And no matter what, they are insisting, well, Job, you must have done something wrong to deserve all of this. And do people assume that themselves sometimes? And sometimes we judge other people that way too, don't we? Well, this happened, that happened, they must have done something wrong. Okay? And I may have told this incident before, but my best friend growing up, who just passed away a couple of weeks ago, when he and his wife, they've had a lot of health problems over the years. And the church they were going to was not a Church of Christ, but they kept having people come over to pray for them and console them. And once again, they were basically saying, what did you do wrong? And are you praying? And my friend Phil and his wife Bobby, they said, yes, we're praying. And then these people basically said, you're not praying hard enough. So once again, their calamity had to be their responsibility. They obviously had been sinning in some great way. They obviously weren't praying hard enough. So very similar to Job's friends, right? And when you go and try to reach people and you're blinded by your assumptions, like that especially, what good are you helping them? Well, I'm sorry for your loss. What did you do? That's not much consolation. It's no consolation. Because how many of us have experienced things that we don't understand what happened or why? Now, probably all of us, really, if we're honest. And have you ever felt like Job, like wondering, why? Why, God? Why is this happening?
Especially when multiple things happen.
Yes. Uh, what is it? The threes. It comes in threes. And I know, I know. Sometimes my sister, she's had a lot of health problems after she was hit by a T-boned in a car and has permanent back problems. And she said, "Well, Mike, I've had 2 out of the 3. I'm not looking forward to the third thing happening." And of course, it did. But we all have trouble with that. And frankly, the problem of suffering and pain that cannot be accounted for is one of the, if not the hardest question for any of us Christians to deal with. Why? Why, God? Why is this happening? Why are you allowing this to happen? Now, sometimes we get into trouble because it is our fault. You know, if we're not taking care of ourselves and we get, some kind of serious illness, sometimes that's due to that. If you're smoking a pack a day, uh, decades later, you come down with, lung cancer or yeah, well, cancers increase, et cetera. And so you could say, well, God, why did I get sick? Well, smoking for 40 years can do it to you. Or if you don't watch what you eat, some of us have predispositions genetically for heart attacks, and that's true. Every one of my uncles on my mother's side and my father's side, except for one, had heart attacks in their 50s. Fairly mild, but nevertheless. And so when I started reading high on my cholesterol, I began, after some research, to realize that it runs in my family. So maybe I better do something about it. If I don't do something about it, and I do have a heart attack like many of my siblings have, whose fault is that? I didn't do what I could. And as it turns out, a few years ago, I'd always been able to control it through exercise and diet, where I had 2 bad readings in a row, and I finally said to the doctor, well, I think it's time what you were suggesting. I'm going to start taking some medicine. And lo and behold, my cholesterol is way down, very good level. And she was very nice. She didn't say, I told you so. But, I feel very fortunate compared to most of my siblings. And I've taken care of myself, yes, but there are things that happened to them that were out of their control. I've got my sister and a brother got hit by cars, hit them, and they have permanent back problems, fusions, and all that. That wasn't their fault. And when they were driving, it wasn't their fault. One was a drunk driver. It hit my brother in his car. So sometimes we can look back and say, yeah, okay, I got to own up to this one. But the hardest thing is when we can't explain. We have not done anything wrong to deserve what we're getting. Okay. So that's the hardest struggle. I took when I was getting my doctorate in religion, I took a class on the philosophy of religion. It was a great class. But we all came to the conclusion that the hardest question is the question of pain and suffering. Sometimes we just cannot explain it. So Job's friends are no real help at this point, are they? They keep going, oh, well, you must have done this. Oh, you must have done this. You must have, they go through the whole catalog of sins. And if you had a chance, could you how many sins could you list that maybe somebody had done? I don't know, quite a few, couldn't you? So that's what the three friends are doing at this point. And so in chapter 31, Job starts giving a list. People call this a negative confession. Job starts listing the things he did not do. Okay, you accuse me of this, this, and this. Let me tell you what I haven't done. Okay, so he said, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a girl. And I have not walked in falsehood and deceit. And I want God to judge me. I want to find out from God what is it I've done wrong. If my heart, in verse 9, has been enticed by a woman, or if I've looked at my neighbor's door, then I would deserve it. Now, in that verse, when he's talking about messing with somebody else's woman, one of the things that was going on in that society was fertility worship. You had Asherah and Ishtar, who were Canaanite gods or goddesses, and part of the ceremony was they had priestesses who at least once a year would offer themselves to ensure fertility for the whole land. This was done all throughout the Middle East. And from the prophets later, there's an indication that some of the Israelites were doing this. It's time for the fertility festival, so line up to have sex with one of the priestesses. It's possible Job is alluding to this. He says, I haven't done that. And then in verse 13, if I have denied justice to my servants and my female servants, if they have a grievance against me, what will I do when God confronts me? Did he not make me in the womb and make them? So he's saying I didn't mistreat my servants. Or in verse 17, if I have denied the desires of the poor, or let the eyes of the widow grow weary, if I've kept bread to myself and not shared it with the fatherless, if I've seen anyone perish for lack of clothing, or a needy man without a garment, if I've raised a hand against the fatherless, then let me be punished. But Job is saying, I didn't do that. So, as is true in not only the Mosaic Law, but the prophets and Jesus and the early church's teaching, caring for the poor and the orphaned and the widows is important. It's something that, unfortunately, we don't hear as much about. That too, Jesus said, take care of the poor. It's not just you and your salvation to God. You need to reach out to others. And the early church was very noted for that. They shared their possessions. And do you think that maybe led to a lot of people being brought to Christ? Yeah. So Job says, I'm not guilty of neglecting that. And so let's I have not rejoiced at my enemy's misfortune. I've not put my trust in gold, verse 31, chapter 31. He was wealthy, but did he earn that through cheating or? Yeah, there's no indication. Can you be wealthy and be a good Christian? Yes. Now, Jesus said it's hard. Like that camel going through the eye of the needle. And when Jesus was teaching that, there was a real disparity between the rich and the poor. And Jesus knew what it was like to be poor. He was raised poor. His dad was a carpenter, and most likely Jesus uh, grew up carpeting, being a carpenter too. Uh, Carpentering. That's probably not even a word. Anyway, so he knew what it was like to work hard and not receive a whole lot of money. And you could look out at the wealthy Jews and especially the wealthy Romans and see their splendors, homes, and you see the palaces and you know all that fancy stuff. And but Job was a wealthy man before it was all taken away. But there's no evidence. He says, I didn't cheat. I didn't mistreat anybody. I earned it fairly. So Job's negative confession, he's basically saying, again, what have I done? This doesn't make sense. And again, that is the hardest question that we have. God, this doesn't make sense. So now the youngest person, Elihu, basically he, in verse 32 or 30, oh, wait a minute, I'm getting mixed up here. No, in chapter 32 and following, Elihu is the youngest. He says, well, look, I haven't said anything up to now because I'm the youngest and you are the wise elders. So he shows a deep respect for the elders, which was very, very typical back then. Nowadays, if you're an elder, you might be teased for it. Hey, old man. I was running a few months ago here in town, and I was running by, and some kids drove by and said, "Hey, old man, you're going slow." Well, number one, I know I'm old. Number two, I know I was going slow. Now, but when I was your age, I could have beat you. I did think that. Elihu is very, he's very diplomatic in starting out. Now, what he basically says in these next few chapters is, look, I put up with all these arguments from these three older ones, and also you, Job. And he essentially is saying the three older ones are wrong. What they've been accusing you, I wouldn't agree with them on that. Okay, they've taken the wrong track. They have not spoken truly about you, Job. So he's wiser than they are. Sometimes being younger doesn't mean you're not wiser. Okay. Sometimes when you're older doesn't mean you are wise. So Elihu goes through and says, let's discern what is right. And he says, Job says, I am innocent, but God denied. This is chapter 34, verse 5 and following. Although I am right, I am considered a liar. Although I am guiltless, his arrow inflicts an incurable wound. What man is like Job, who drinks scorn like water? He keeps company with evildoers. He associates with wicked men. For he says it profits a man nothing when he tries to please God. So listen to me, you men of understanding. He's talking to the other three. Far be it from God to do evil, from the Almighty to do wrong. He does repay a man for what he's done. He brings upon him what his conduct deserves. It is unthinkable that God would do wrong, that he, the Almighty, would pervert justice. And, without him, all of mankind would perish. Can he who hates justice govern? Will you condemn the just and mighty one? His eyes are on the ways of men, verse 21. He sees very, very every step. So Elihu, he doesn't so much push the idea that the other three have, that Job, you have done this and this and this wrong. But what he does start to focus on is, who are we to question God? God is, God is a God of justice. God is all knowing, all seeing. And so he starts to point this out to not only the three, but to Job too. And look at in verse 30, chapter 35, verse 5. Look at the heavens and see. Gaze at the clouds so high above you. If you sin, how does that affect him? If your sins are many, what does that do to him, to God? If you're righteous, what do you give to him, or what does he receive from your hand? Your wickedness affects only a man like yourself, and your righteousness only the sons of men. Men cry out under a load of oppression. They plead for relief from the arm of the powerful. But no one says, where is God my maker, who gives songs in the night, who teaches more to us than to the beasts of the earth, and makes us wiser than the birds of the air? So Elihu's point is that, God is God. God is just. And we have a God who is wiser than the beasts or any others.
Those two verses there, 11 and 12, remind me of the New Testament when Jesus is, do not worry. Who takes care of the birds of the air and the flowers, who dresses the flowers in all their splendor, and takes care of them. Why should you worry?
Right, right. And I never have a problem with worrying, do you? Believe me, I'm being very, very sarcastic. Yes. Brett.
Eli seems to be the true friend. He's actually talking about that I'm not condemning God or
Right,
let's consider God in this whole picture.
right,
Instead of trying to find fault in one and breaking the other, it's who are you to judge God, who are you to man?
right,
So he's actually pointing to say, hey, listen to me. But what struck me is, go back to 32 verse 8, that the Spirit in the first and try to be almighty, but give to them an understanding. It's not our own strength, it's not how we handle things. It's not so much what happens to us, but how we deal with it. And use God to build us and make us stronger, even though there's calamities that happen.
right. Somebody, it's been said for thousands of years, it's not what happens, it's how you respond to it. And that is so, so true. Or another way of putting it, you can't control what happens, but you can control how you respond to it. And that is one of the wisest points that helps direct my life when I start worrying. And Jesus' point is that, hey, look at the creatures, are they sitting around on a tree limb saying to their buddy next to them, geez, I don't know, we need some rain, but it doesn't look very good. It's awfully hot today. We better find some good shade. No, Jesus says, hey, don't worry about that stuff. So you try to have that attitude. And there are times where, I grew up being a professional worrier. Okay? I took things so seriously. I was very grown up very early. I was very responsible. And that gave me some advantages growing up in my very chaotic family. But it also, meant that I was, overly analyzed everything and worried about it. Okay, what'll happen if this happens? And in some ways that can be turned into something good. I have a very good analytical mind. But and my youngest son, Mark, is very much like me. and he tends to worry too much. And his wife one time called me. This was many years ago. I was on a run, and I happened to have the phone, and I heard, "Oh, Krista's calling. This is strange." And so I stopped and, Mike, Mark is a lot like you. Maybe you could help me to understand him. And she was talking about him getting so worried and so obsessed, overthinking things. And so I spent about a half an hour explaining to her, well, okay, this is what you could probably do to help Mark. This helps me, you know. And I never had another call, so something I did. I imparted some wisdom somehow, and and now their oldest daughter Lily is kind of like that. She's going to start college next year, and I'm praying that she not get too stressed and worried. And now, when you are that way, you can accomplish great things, but there's a price sometimes. So don't spend your time worrying and being stressed out. And again, that is so easy to say, isn't it? And I think especially when we're facing physical illness or maybe old age illnesses, it's very hard. Lynn's father one time would frequently tell me, Mike, I just want you to know, getting old is not for sissies. And I keep telling my children and my grandchildren that when they say, well, you shouldn't be doing this, you think about your age. And I keep saying, well, I'll tell you what, when I get old, I'll let you know. That doesn't convince them, by the way. So when we're hurting, when we're in pain, when we have limitations, and again, some of my family members and some of my best friends have conditions that are never going to get better. They're just not. And I know it's what a struggle they have at times. Okay. And again, I think about Paul, how, he complained about the thorn in the flesh, and he'd asked God to take it away, and God said, no, but my power is sufficient for you. And Paul did learn that it's through that particular weakness, whatever it was, we don't know for sure, that he was able to show people the power of God. Some think it was his eyes. We don't know. If you notice, a lot of Paul's letters are not, the actual writing was not in his hand. Sometimes toward the end, so I, Paul, am writing this farewell to you. Or this was written in this ending is written in my hand. So it's very possible he had an eye condition. Who knows? But if you can imagine Paul trying to travel around all the place and trying to preach to people, if you're having trouble with your eyes, that'd be pretty challenging. Okay. But some of you are struggling with conditions that are probably never going to go away. Arthritis, fibromyalgia. My wife has Parkinson's. And then there are other conditions, even more of a struggle. Lonnie's been struggling a long time with that leg condition, And I had one of my sister-in-laws had a sepsis issue that took months and months and months for her to finally, after several operations too, to finally, okay, oh, we found it. And so that is difficult. It is difficult. So Elihu is pretty much right on about this. The three older wise men are wrong to, produce all these false accusations toward Job. And Job maybe you are underestimating who God is. So, at the end of chapter 37, verse 14, listen to this, Job. Stop and consider God's wonders. Do you know how God controls the clouds and makes the lightning flash? You who swelter in your clothes when the land lies hushed under the south wind, can you join him in spreading out the skies, hard as a mirror of cast bronze? Tell us what we should say to him, to God. We can't draw up our case because of our darkness. Okay. So that's kind of the main point that Elihu was making. Okay. You guys are wrong, but Job, you're wrong too, because who are we to, question God? He and his ways are far above us. So finally, in chapter 38, God speaks. The Lord answered Job out of the storm, and some translations are out of the whirlwind or tornado. Can you imagine that? I've seen a tornado from many miles away. Not close. But I've seen the damage. And some of you probably have too. And I tell you what, that would be so frightening. There's a new movie out, Twister, another remake.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah. And I've heard it's pretty good too. And if I get the time, I want to see it. And of course, I jokingly asked my son John and his wife Laura if I could take the kids with me. And they said, absolutely not. Well, especially little Michael, he'd have nightmares. He's very fearful about things anyway. So the Lord answered Job out of the tornado, and he said, who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Okay, let's turn the tables here. Okay, Job, you've been asking me and all these other people on your side have been claiming all sorts of things about me. Okay, now I'll question you. And remember, Job had wanted this. Can I have a hearing before God? Well, I would think after seeing the tornado, he'd be backing off real quick. Okay, it's kind of like Moses and the burning bush. The burning bush is a lot less intimidating than a tornado. So this is really frightening. Okay, so starts listing questions. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. There's a little bit of sarcasm in some of these remarks by God. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy. Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness. When I said, this far you may come and no farther. Here is where your proud waves halt, okay? The ocean has its limits. We exist because the land exists. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place? So the sun, the moon, the day and the night. Did you do this? Verse 16, have you journeyed to the springs of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Now, certainly nobody in Job's day had done this. Now, we've done some of that. But then we can turn to other things that God will point out that we have not done and may never do. What is the way to the abode of light? Where does the darkness reside? Surely you know, for you were already born. You've lived so many years. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle. What is the way to the place where the lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth? Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain and a path for the thunderstorm? Who produces rain and replenishes the earth? And then in verse 31, he starts talking about the constellations, the skies. Can you bind the beautiful Pleiades? Can you loose the cords of Orion? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons, or lead out the bear with its cubs? Again, he's referring to constellations we refer to now. Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth? So, yeah, maybe we can now, we've been on the seafloor. We've been around the earth. Now, let's talk about the stars. And again, how many galaxies exist? The last I heard, 100 to 200 billion galaxies. How many stars are in one galaxy? 100 to 200 billion stars in a galaxy. So you start multiplying that, and your calculator runs out of room. Now we talk about distances. Okay? You know, you hear about a light year. You know, the star is 20 light years away. That's close compared to, what, 13.6 billion light years. How far is one light year? Over 6 trillion miles. So once again, start multiplying, and good luck finding the calculator. 6 trillion times 13.6 billion. That's how vast the universe is. Okay? So, what? No, we can't comprehend it. Yeah. Have you seen? Oh, thank you, Jeremy. Have you seen some of the images of the Hubble and now the Webb, where it shows, you know, thousands of galaxies way far away, and it's just a little sliver of the sky that they're showing you there. So just multiply that all the way around. It is overwhelming. So what God is saying, and I guess I better sum up here because number one, I'm running out of coffee, but number two, Jeremy is doing what I asked him to do a few weeks ago. What God is saying is, Job, you're in no position to ask me questions. Now, God never really answers Job why he was suffering, does he? And sometimes we just have to go by our faith and our relationship with God. And that's what Job does. He says, God, I realize now, I can't expect you to provide me answers to everything. There's so much that I don't know anyway. And so Job is not given an answer, just like we are not given an answer. Although in some ways we are, because of the death and resurrection of Jesus. When we are suffering, when we're dying, we know that there's something else ahead that's going to make up for all of that suffering and pain. Just like Jesus, all of his suffering and pain on the cross was made up for when he was raised from the dead and went back to the Father. Someday we will be raised from the dead and go to the Father and Jesus. And we'll look back and say, it was all worth it. Now, at the end of the book, Job is blessed, rewarded. He gains back. He's able to start a new family, gains wealth. He has to make a sacrifice for the 3 wise men who were wrong. But, everything is restored. And for us, whatever pain and suffering we're encountering and loss, it will be made up for us too. Okay. Well, thank you for your attention and your participation.